This is a Black Nouveau web exclusive. The Republic of Ghana is located on the west coast of Africa. It has a population of about 27 million people. Last summer, Ramel, Jermaine Reed, and Shawn, three healthcare professionals from Milwaukee, spent 10 days traveling across the country. Two of them are here to share their experiences. Thanks for joining us, guys.
And thanks for having us.
Whose idea was it to go to Ghana in the first place?
You know what? It was Jermaine Reed, the second part of the trio that's not here today. He just gave a call and said, you know what, we're going to go down there. And what we wanted to do was a couple of things. Clearly, it was a pilgrimage to get back to our roots, but also working within, the foster care industry and doing so much work with the young children who've been taken away from homes was a way to find out some other things that was done in our motherland that we could bring back into the States as it related to helping children to acclimate to new environments. What's some of those things we could bring back?
What did you learn?
Well, you know what I mean? It's not enough time to tell everything with that because, once you go down there, you recognize, honestly, like sometimes you hear about, we need to have an African-centered culture, curriculum within the schools. We recognize how little we've been taught about Africa. When we went to Ghana, our tour guide, George, was just absolutely amazing. He was so knowledgeable on so many different topics. Yes. And not only him, but the places he would have us go, it would be other experts in the area. And so you say, well, what did you learn? You learned that, Ghana was the first Black Republic sub-Saharan that declared its independence, and that set off the whole stage. So even when you look at their flag, there's a black star in the middle, and that's because they're the vanguard of all the African nations to say, hey, we can get our independence. So when you go to Ghana, especially as a child, a descendant of the diaspora, you start to get a different pride. Like this is when we started to regain, a lot of our lost culture back because they were colonized by the British, and it was like, no, we're going to be our own independent nation, and that started the turn for all of the other nations.
Shawn, what did it mean for you?
And I agree with everything Ramel mentioned. Life-changing. I mean, to get off the plane, and one of the first things that a lot of our family say is welcome home.
Aquaba.
Aquaba. And just to get that, it sends goosebumps through your body. And just to walk through and go through and see so many beautiful hues of Black people or African people, and to look at so many people, it's such a feeling of happiness. But then at the same time, you have sorrows, and there's so many emotions rolled up into one. But to get there and to learn so much about the different Adinkra symbols and going to different the slave castles and learning about the different ethnic groups who reign throughout different times in history is so much, and at so many points it just leaves you in awe.
So. No, that's interesting. You talk about the slave castles, that experience. What did that do for you? How did you feel?
That in itself, and I just heard you take that side because when you're talking about the emotional aspect of it, you're charged. You're emotionally charged to say, you know what? Let's do this, let's go. And then once you driving up and you see it and you see this massive building, and which is 400 or 500 years old, and some were even a little older than that. But to get in there and see and to take those steps and to see one of the particular castles had a back door, which was from the top of the castle, but it was a back door and stairs that went down to the women's quarters. And that was solely so the captain could have his pick at all of the women. And so when you talk about that emotional aspect of it, some of it will just have you so enraged, but then going through there at different parts to see these small rooms, maybe 10 by 10, where they had 50, 60, 70 of our ancestors. It's just so many emotions. But then understanding that you had so many Africans from so many different tribes, and they still knew how to, in some form or another, relate to each other. So very emotional.
What about for you?
But yeah, you know what? To say emotional, I don't even know if that's the greatest word, because it's like what you start to recognize is how special your DNA is. Because when we talk about the Middle Passage or we talk about the slave castles, one thing we didn't learn about, which was, I think, was something that was so knowledgeable, so informational, was we learned about the traveling from when they were taken and having to walk hundreds of miles before they even got to these dungeons. And so now they're walking, and then they go to this place called what they call Ancestral River Park now, where for like a better word, the slaves took their last bath. So this was the last time they got, but it wasn't a bath from any type of humanity. It was so that they could wash them up, make them look good, and then start the slave auction. And so the people would take a bath, and then they would be branded. So even before we went to the castles, we took these steps and we walked there. We were able to get into the water, and it's like you're retracing the steps of your ancestors. And when he says you feel proud, it's because you say, if my ancestors could go through this, you just recognize what's inside your DNA to be so resilient, to be so to be able to persevere through so much. I understand why we're so strong and we can do what we do. But then to walk from that part all the way to those castles, to see them, to understand that they had no real places to urinate, they had no places to really sleep. It was just all wood, and you could still feel the smell.
Absolutely.
It's like you could feel and hear. It's almost like I could describe it with words, but it's still undescribable. But what you knew, it was a place of horror, it was a place of torment, but it also had to be a place of bond and love for them to be able to make it through that. And, we talk about the Middle Passage. This was everything before the Middle Passage. So what I got just in a nutshell was just how strong our brothers and sisters were from the past.
Now, there's some beautiful parts of Ghana, as you showed throughout your pictures. Describe what the beauty of Ghana looks like.
Well, the irony is like right off Elmina Bay and Cape Coast where these dungeons are at, you see these beautiful rivers. We're looking at the Atlantic Ocean, we're looking at beaches and rocks, and it looks like, something out of a catalog when you're trying to go for a vacation.
Right.
There's so many beautiful parts. You go into some of the cities and you look and you say it's very westernized in what you do. So some of the things that, you sometimes see on TV, you will see those villages that's, a little, impoverished, where you see the goats and the sheep and cows running around and everything like that. So you'll get, a combination. But when you see the most beautiful aspects of it, and specifically because we were traveling a lot, we traveled by van, so you could see the mountainsides, the mountains, the terrains, and it's just an awe-inspiring place. It's definitely the mother civilization. You can see how everything sprung from there.
I think to add to that, when you talk about one of the most beautiful aspects of the entire trip were the actual people. To have those dialogues and exchanges, and you talking about just wonderful, embracing, lovely, beautiful folks, like everywhere we went.
Well, what are some of the major concerns of the people of Ghana?
Well, I think from my perspective, monetarily, it was our dollar was about $4 and about
40 cents, 420, it would change to
and it was floating currency, so it would go up and down. So various areas, that dollar that we would have would be different somewhere else slightly. And then one of their things was that they wouldn't take single U.S. dollars. It would have to be 20s, 50s, and $100 bills because from their perspective, back in America, we've identified so many ways to modify and make fake money.
Right.
So they would need the bigger bills. So I think that was one of the larger.
Yeah.
How high is the poverty rate there?
Oh, I mean, it's like you said, it's about 27 million people in Ghana, and it's about the size of Oregon. So, sometimes we think about like New York, 8 million people stacked up, but it's not this, first world country. It's a country that has different areas, some places where there's not, running water, where there's not indoor from a sanitation standpoint. Right. So when you say how impoverished is it, financially, they're in a difficult state. But one of the things what Brother Kwame and I pointed out, it's so much love there. And even within like the depths of some of the financial struggles, you can see the love, you can see the sharing, you can see the caring, and you see the work ethic. We talk about people being on the grind. We would get up early to go on our trips, be about 4 or 5 in the morning. You see people walking like it was like 1 p.m. in the afternoon.
Right.
So when you say, how was it? There's a poverty of financial needs, but when you talk about a poverty of spirit, you won't see that there.
But how does that relate to Milwaukee? How can you relate the two, or is it even relatable?
You know what I mean? This is the thing. If I'm not eating somewhere, it's hard anywhere. But it's a different level of poverty because it's like you'll see people walking with no shoes. One of the things what they love about the West is they wanted our clothes. They wanted
all of our
shoes because it was something that they didn't get down there. So when you talk about like what is it like the difference between Milwaukee, it's a third world, first world. So it's going to be some advantage in first world. You won't say you know, we'll say we're poor because we don't get to eat what we want to eat. But when you go down there, you see like these skinny cows, these skinny goats, and you just see it's a different whole setting and period. But when you would see some of the people who were really hurting, like some of the people they said they lived off of 100 SETI a month, which would basically be about, $100 a month.
$100 US, which was about 440 SETI.
And so it was like, imagine living off $100 a month.
For 30 days.
And having to share that with your family. That was the biggest thing. Is like people knew they had an obligation to give back.
Now, one of the things that both of you experienced was a name change. You received names. Can you talk about that?
Well, I had the opportunity to watch Brother Kwaku as he went first. And so part of the naming ceremony was every day of the week was associated in terms of the males and females. So certain days of the week had certain names associated with them. And so with Brother Kwaku here, which was born on a
Wednesday.
And then myself, who was Kwamana, was born on a Saturday. And so with that, we had additional things that were tied to each day of the week. And so with mine particularly, Kwamana Sinkuran, and what that means is of the higher in terms of ancestral, religious aspects of power. And so it was funny because when they did my actual ceremony, and they mentioned my name, the crowd, like the villagers, were kind of like, oh. And so I'm sitting here going through the ceremony like, okay, I like that. And so it definitely gives you a feeling of home. So to say the least, Kwamana Sinkuran.
Great. So just to wrap this up real quick, how expensive was a trip like this?
You know what? It's hard to put it in monetary terms because there's so many ways in which you can travel, so many things in which you can do. So what one person may do, it may be different for another person. But I think a person of one probably, if they put together $5,000, could have this package.
Okay. And you were there for how many days?
It was a 10-day trip.
And that included the tour guide?
Yes.
Yeah. Because you can't do it without.
Yeah, and our tour guide George was absolutely awesome. George's tours down in Ghana is like our trip wouldn't have been the same without him because he's done this for so many years. He knows the places to go, the people to put you to. And like I said, when we were done, we would be on the road for 4 hours. He would be talking the whole 4 hours, just giving us information, giving us knowledge.
So much.
And then we would go to the places we were going with other people who were so capable. So having an ultimate tour guide, not only for knowledge, but also for safety, is imperative.
Well, this was a fantastic experience. I know you guys are going to go again, so
Oh, definitely.
I want to be included on that trip.
Sounds
You
good.
come to our village where they adopted us. We'll take you back.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.